Okay, so instead of doing the presentation like we've been doing, I'm going to do this one a little differently. Now, I want to show you some images of different pieces of folk technology and talk a little bit about what they do and kind of what that word technology means. So, here you can kind of see that this is a room that's used for smoking meat. You've got a little three-legged milking stool. Um, you've got the meat hanging from the rafter, I guess. All of this in the image, they're different pieces of folk technology, even the rafter from which the meat is hanging. Things that we don't think about being technology or even think about as being folk often are as well. So here you see in the front of the picture a sort of older looking wooden fence, and in the background a newer looking fence. These are made quite simply, but also quite intriguingly. They're done with very little nails, very few of that sort of modern thing. Everything's sort of just slid into place in these. And people were building fences in these ways. Like here's one, it's a stone fence. There's no mortar. It's simply laid one stone on top of another in a particular way. And these have been around since the days of slavery. Most of these stone fences like this that you see throughout Tennessee, throughout Kentucky, they were made by slaves. And we think of them as technology because they had to come up with ways to make this stuff last without the modern conveniences we have. And so this stuff did last. You can also see here's a little garden shed. We probably don't think of that as being technological, but again, making use of what you have. It's brick, stone, wood, and really that's it. So drying and smoking meat, the way that people kind of figured this out, this is an example of a folk technology. These are called dibbles. My dad had one of these. They are implements that allow you to make a hole of a certain size and of a certain depth that then you plant seeds into. And so before we had all of our fancy machines to do this stuff for us, people used these dibbles. Here's a newer one, but a closer shot to give you an idea of kind of what they actually look like. And you can see this one has marks on it with inches. Some of them, if we go back one, they don't have that. The one that my dad has doesn't have the inches marked on it. But he knows by looking at kind of the wear on it how deep something is. Things like moonshine stills. Some of you may have never seen them. Some of you may be quite familiar. If nothing else, there's a show on now called The Moonshiners, and you have people using this old-time technology today with the same recipes. There was an episode not long ago where somebody was making George Washington's home brew, and they used his recipe. So things, we probably don't go around thinking these as technologies, but it's the way that these folks were and are making use of what they have to create new things, to solve problems, to preserve their food. Here's a seed spreader. And again, this is all wood and metal. Today you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you buy a plastic one that serves the same idea. You just kind of walk along and use it to kind of scatter the seed. And back, way back, and some people today, they do this instead of going and buying this plastic thing that's going to give out, as my dad would say, in a matter of weeks, years. Whereas this, in this picture, has been around for a really long time. It's an antique. Here are a variety of handmade farm tools. Now, I'm not going to lie and tell you that I know what each of these is. I see a plow, and I see some various other implements. I don't know what they all are. But these are the sorts of things that people use. They'd hook them up to, as you can see in the picture, in the background of this picture, to oxen, to horses, to what donkeys, whatever. And that's how they plowed the field. Things that don't have to do with farming or that sort of thing. Here's a honey dipper. Many of you probably have these, or your parents do. And this is actually quite ingenious because people today are using it because a spoon just doesn't quite hold the honey in the same way. It doesn't quite do the job that this simple wooden implement does. People pay at stores today to get these wooden honey dippers. Here's some knitting tools, and again, I'm not going to pretend like I know what to do with these, but these are pretty simple. Here's one that's kind of all painted up for a little kid. This is a way that children were taught some basic knitting maneuvers. This little fellow here that's all painted up is looks like a boy, but they're often called Susie Strick. And you wrap the yarn in a certain way around those little metal things on his head, and then you use the little wooden pointy implement there to create this stitch. So these are just different pieces of technology, and again, I just wanted to present you with things that maybe weren't included in the reading, some that maybe were, but to give you a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about folk technology. Okay, so now I'm shifting over a bit into our Blackboard course, and I just want to talk about a couple of things from the last week since we're not meeting in a Collaborate session this week because of the federal holiday. So as we're doing our discussion boards, as we're going through the presentations, and as we're doing the blogs, there's some things I want you to keep in mind. We've got 2 weeks under our belts now. And in week 1 and week 2, a couple of little glitches. That's okay. It's expected. Now we kind of have everything squared away. And from this point forward, as you're doing particularly the presentations with quizzes, you need to spend time in them. As we discussed on that very first day where we met in person, our class is placing a lot of the onus on you. I have the material presented. I have you working through discussions to try to mimic class discussion as best we can. But it's up to you to do the work, and I can see how much time you're spending in each of the presentations. And so like with the one that glitched, if you were only in the presentation for 8 minutes, I did not correct your quiz grade. Because I have no idea what you could have possibly gotten from a presentation that should have taken you 20 minutes at least to get through. I have no idea what you could have gotten out of it in 8 minutes. So you didn't get your full credit from the glitchy quiz because I really don't think that you could have passed the quiz. So you want to keep that sort of thing in mind. 2, outside of just quiz grades, when you're going through the presentations, we're practicing those skills, but the real application comes into your papers. The discussion boards, the blogs, those help prep us for those papers. But the info in your readings and in the presentations, that's the stuff that you're applying in the papers. And when I go to grade those papers, I do expect that you have put forth the effort up front in reading them and going through the lecture material so that when you apply it, you're doing it correctly. You know what's going on, you know what you're doing, and you've turned in a paper that reflects that. So there's that. 2, discussion boards really want to see us doing more in the way of conversing with one another. Don't do your post, go and respond to 2 people and decide you're done. We need these to be like the conversations and discussions we might have in a classroom setting. And we wouldn't have me ask a question, one person say something, two people respond, and then move on. That's not how it works. So I want to see more responding to one another. And you can see here where some of you don't have responses. Now, some of that is that some of you posted after 5. 5 o'clock is the cutoff, so if you're not doing your posts before 5, nobody's going to respond to them. If you do them right at 5, probably nobody's going to respond to them because at 5, the week is over. And so nobody's coming in. So you've got to be mindful of your time. You need to do your initial posting early so that you can get those responses. When people respond, come back and respond to their responses. If I have responded to you and asked you questions, respond to my reply. And then on your blogs, if we can go back, maybe. So for the classmate interview, I had a couple of sort of panicked emails like, I haven't heard from my partner, what do I do? And always give me those sorts of updates. But in addition, we do need to make sure, again, you're doing this, and if I ask you to respond to people, respond, and then look at who responded to you. If they asked you questions, if they raised concerns, especially in this classmate interview, if they feel like they weren't represented correctly, if you got something wrong and they have raised that issue, you need to respond to them, either to say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, or to explain how you got what you got from their interview. And this is the expectation. Discussion boards go to your participation grade. And from this point going forward, as I'm grading them, I am going to be looking for that deeper, more active involvement. And if it's not there, you're not going to earn the A. On the discussion boards, on the blogs, part of that grade is going to be your responses to other people. And if someone asks you a question in a reasonable time frame, the week's not over, somebody's posed a question, and you never respond to it, that will affect your blog grade. I don't like having to do penalties. I'd much rather reward, but I'm not sure how else I can get us in the habit of creating these conversations with each other. And it's just so important that you do that so that when you're doing your papers, you have forged this community so that you're honest with each other in peer review, so that you accept criticism well, and so that then your papers turn out to be the best that they possibly can. So that's that. That's the video that replaced the presentation and quiz for the folk technology. If you have questions, let me know. Remember, if I don't hear from you, I assume all is well. And for some of you, that may not be the case. So again, the onus is really on you to communicate with me. And I hope that I start hearing from more of you. Some of you are doing a fabulous job, and you can kind of tell on my end from grades, people either have really good A's or they're failing. There's not a whole lot of in between. There are a couple, but there's right now A's and failing. Not a lot in the middle. And that's concerning since we haven't had anything major yet. Everybody ought to have an A at this point. So keep these things in mind. Let me know when you have questions. Pop into my office. Send me emails during office hours. If you need to meet outside of office hours, let me know. Today's a Tuesday, and I'm here on campus, so I could have scheduled all sorts of appointments if people had wanted to meet with me. So remember, I'm here. I'm happy to help, and I really do want you guys to all do really, really well with this.